One. What's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray, on Building on Bitcoin. Today I'm joined by Brad Mills, one of the OGs here in Canada, one of the big influencers, entrepreneurs, investors. This guy's done it all. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing great, man. My beard is growing and
Epic.
I got 4 days left of free speech, so I'm trying to use it while I can.
That is sends chills down my spine. Well, so okay, you and I did a kind of like a 2 hour, 1 hour session a couple years ago, which covers your backstory and all that kind of stuff. So I'll try and put a link in the show notes so people can get your background. But today I feel like we're gonna talk about something very important, right? So maybe help the audience get set up for what's going on here in Canada.
Yeah, well, I mean, Canada's been a very influential place for Bitcoin ideas. We've got a lot of talent here that, whether it's Rodolfo Novak from CoinKite, which makes has been making like the best Bitcoin hardware wallets since what, like 2012 or 13, whenever the hardware wallets started to come out, like he was on there doing that. So we got a lot of Canadians that have been involved in the early Bitcoin days. Peter Todd was talking on the Cypherpunks mailing list with Satoshi back in the day. Um, Adam Back has Blockstream mining operations in Canada, major Bitcoin mining operations that had to leave Canada because Quebec and BC started to get very anti-energy under the Liberal government, and which doesn't make any sense because more power than the whole Bitcoin network uses goes over the waterfalls and the dams unused in Quebec, which Bitcoin could help green the entire energy grid of Canada, but we've got strange seemingly anti-progress and anti-energy, anti-human policymakers at the top writing laws for us. But there's also a lot of folks from the early days of DigiCash and stuff like that. Like there's some connections there in Montreal. Austin Hill and his brother, Jeremy or Jonathan. What's Jonathan's last name? Wilkinson from Blockstream. I mean,
Hmm.
if you want to even go with Vitalik and all those guys from Toronto that were doing the Bitcoin meetups in the early days in Toronto,
Hmm.
Anthony Diorio, all those folks. So
Take us to
yourself, I
Alberta.
mean,
Take us to Alberta.
oh
Who's
yeah,
making waves
we
there?
got
Steve Barber, Adam.
Steve Barber doing the block upstream data, making those hash huts. Dave Bradley, Francis Poulet, like
Francis,
lots of
baby.
lots of Bitcoiners are very influential. Jeff Booth, Price of Tomorrow. I
There
mean,
you
come
go.
on, BTC sessions in
Come
Alberta.
on,
We
keep
got,
going,
geez,
bro.
what the
Keep
heck,
going.
man? Punching
Like,
above our weight here.
right? Right?
It's like you think of all these Canadians, and not many people realize a lot of them are Canadian, but there is a lot of Canadian footprint in Bitcoin, and we punch above our weight class, I think. And yeah, the Americans have a lot more influence on politics than the Canadians do. And I've, kind of figured out, I think maybe one of the reasons why. Um, you've seen the very wealthy Bitcoiners in America be able to influence policy, and they're able to effectively lobby their governments and their state governments and the federal government and effectively buy Trump for $100 million or whatever that number was that they were able to raise in donations for Trump and get the federal government aligned to free speech, Bitcoin protection, self-custody rights, and all these very positive things for property rights and personal liberties related to Bitcoin. And we haven't really been able to do that here in Canada. And I sort of got active in Canadian politics after the convoy when they started freezing bank accounts. And I started to get very scared of staying in Canada because I thought, what's the point of having FU money if you live in a country that doesn't respect property rights? I mean, Bitcoin is censorship resistant, but I'm not censorship resistant. So, so I don't want to live in a country that does not respect property rights, does not value entrepreneurship and independent thought, that just wants to conform to whatever the government says and mandates as truth, and does not respect sound money, property rights, free speech, individual liberties, all these things. So a lot of us got reactivated in the political sphere in Canada in 2022 and 2023 when it looked like you either had to leave or you were going to have problems being a wealthy person or being a free speech opinionated person in Canada. So what I discovered as I tried to sort of gain influence in the political sphere here in Canada was like money has been taken out of Canadian politics to a very big extent at the grassroots. I mean, you can only donate a maximum of like $3,500 as an individual, and companies can't donate to political candidates. So there's this thing in Canada where like uh, we have MPs, and the MPs have electoral district associations, EDAs, which are like little organizations for the ridings to try to, you know, do whatever campaigns during elections. And the EDAs, you can only donate like $1,750 or something like that to an EDA. And then you can only donate like $1,750 to a conservative, or sorry, a political candidate in an election year, and then another 1750 generally a year to the party. So it's like very much capped. Like you can't just go roll up and write $100 million check from 10 Bitcoin whales like they were able to do in the United States, and like, hey, money talks. Here's my policy asks. I just want you to stay the hell out of my business and stop persecuting Bitcoin. Okay, sure, I'll take the $100 million and I'll write an executive order that says, you know, we're gonna protect Bitcoin mining and protect Bitcoin ownership and all this stuff and the witch hunt on Bitcoin. Unfortunately, it's not how it works here. So it's been tough to try to understand how to influence in politics in Canada. And I guess what I've realized is that it just takes work. It's just a lot more work here in Canada. It takes a lot more people, a lot more voices. What actually matters is you going out and getting involved and speaking to the MP, donating your $50 or $100, joining your electoral district association, joining the party for the leadership race and voting. Like they really do look at the individual contributions. Like if you're volunteering to go door knocking with your MP, that means a lot more than like a $20,000 check from someone in the United States, because it's so hard to get people politically activated in Canada. So I was just surprised when I donated the max in 2022. I was like, I was part of this inner circle group that, you know, they really care about and all this stuff. Like, seriously, for $3,500, you're like, that's such a big deal. And you compare the amount of raising that the Canadian political parties do to the American political parties, it's just obscene. Like I think in the 2016 election, the Democrats, like Hillary, spent like $100 billion or something crazy on the election. And the Conservative Party raised $40 million last year, and that was record breaking. So I mean, our the money situation is just completely different here in Canada and in the United States.
Agreed. By the way, I interviewed David Bailey. My interview went live, I think, a few days ago, who was one of the people that had a hand in
Oh,
Trump's
big time.
orange pilling. And he definitely, I mean, he talked about the money, like, and I asked him directly about this several times. But one of the things he said was just the fact that there's this kind of vibrant cohort of Bitcoiners that has nothing to do with giving Trump money, but they have Bitcoin and they don't want to get squashed, right? And so by singing the Bitcoin tune for just a week, a couple days or whatever, all of a sudden you had this like very independently kind of, minded group of people that aren't necessarily blue or red, were all of a sudden like, hey, you've got my support. So I guess, okay, so the money thing is what it is. We can't probably change it in 4 days. But what can we change? What do we have control over? What like can we get to the Bitcoiners like you said out there? Are there enough of them in Canada? How many of us are there? I heard it's like 10% or something of the population. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, that's crazy when I heard that. And that was from the Bank of Canada study. So when I heard that, I was like, that seems a little bit high, but it may be because, like we said, we punch above our weight class here. We've got a bunch of Canadian companies that are out there advocating for Bitcoin all the time. Beaver Bitcoin, Bull Bitcoin, Shake Pay. And then there's a whole bunch of like exchanges like Well Simple and all these large sort of institutional TradFi companies, like lots of Bitcoin focused exchanges and lots of traditional new finance tech companies, whatever you want to call them, that have added Bitcoin and crypto as well onto their platforms, which has really created this large amount of Bitcoin holders, whether they're holding Bitcoin directly or they're holding it on their Simple account or whatever it is. There's something like 3 to 4 million people that have Bitcoin in Canada. And ShakePay did a survey recently that they did this from the political perspective, and it turns out that it's like something between like 25 and 40% of crypto and Bitcoin holders are still undecided on the election. And like 90% of them want to support pro Bitcoin candidates because they feel that like the majority of people that own Bitcoin in Canada feel like Bitcoin has protected them from inflation. It has increased their financial literacy. It gives them hope for the future. It helps them save for their futures and their kids. So it's a very hopeful thing. And people don't want to see anti-Bitcoin policies coming through. So I don't know, man. It's like I kind of wish all the exchanges would take a stand. Like we need all these exchanges to step up and say like we want you to vote for Pierre Poilievre because he's pro Bitcoin. He holds Bitcoin. He owns Bitcoin in self custody and in the ETF. He's said positive things in the past about Bitcoin. He's made the first Lightning transaction of like literally like any politician, but certainly a major Canadian party leader politician. He's donated in Bitcoin in the past. There was a bill by Dan Albus in 2022 that was to and make it so that we could donate Bitcoin and not have to pay cap gains. Like how simple, like what kind of that's just such an easy no-brainer ask. Like in Canada, we can't donate Bitcoin without paying the cap gains on it. That's ridiculous. You can donate stocks without paying the cap gains on it. Why can't you donate Bitcoin without paying cap gains on it? So Pierre Poilievre has said in the past, if he's elected prime minister, he will at least support things like that, where we can have more sane policies around Bitcoin. But, you know, what the average person, I guess, needs to understand is look a little bit beyond what the CBC and the mainstream news are telling us about what the policy issues are. And really, 70% of Canadians generally, it's the cost of living. You see a lot of people coming up with these like fringe sort of talking points to kind of distract from the cost of living and inflation and the money problems. But really, the majority of Canadians are just suffering from high cost of living. And unfortunately, because we live in this country where the mainstream news gets major subsidies, $1.4 billion a year for the CBC, and they have an extreme left bias. Even the Liberal and NDP voters that were surveyed admit there's a left bias in the CBC. So they portray Bitcoin in the news as a Pierre Poilievre right wing thing, a Trump thing, and it doesn't actually protect you from inflation. So that all during 2023, during the bear market, all they were doing was hammering on Pierre for support of Bitcoin. And so because we live in this crazy system of, well, the money's taken out of the politics at the grassroots level, but then once you become in power, you can then have multi-billion dollar slush funds that you can give to all your friends. So the money's put back into politics at the government level. So the government funds the media and funds these green energy projects that go nowhere. And a lot of people connected to the government get wealthy. So the money is put back in, but it's not at the grassroots. So it's hard for people to really grasp what's happening, what's the real story, because we're propagandized to constantly. We're the highest educated in OECD nations, but really what that means is we're the highest propagandized to. And so we have the government, left-wing government funding, anti-Bitcoin messaging in our mainstream news, painting a narrative that Bitcoin is somehow a right-wing policy and bad. And now we have a central banker that's about to come in, the central banker that wrote an op-ed at that basically suggested shutting down the bank accounts of the seditionists that were in Ottawa and, called them treasonous and all this stuff. Mark Carney was the central bank governor of Bank of England. He was the central bank governor of the Bank of Canada. He's been asked about Bitcoin multiple times, and it's always anti-Bitcoin. He comes back with always negative things to say about Bitcoin. In 2018, he called it a failed currency. In his book, he said it was a values. I think in the book he mentioned something about how it was going to be you know, a, a, a case of monetary amnesia that challenges the traditional financial system, and it needs to be highly regulated. Recently he was asked about Bitcoin, and his response was, "Who cares?" So he clearly does not like Bitcoin, and he's been wrong. He's been nothing but, hoping for inflation, afraid of deflation, doesn't like Bitcoin, architects CBDC policies, promotes that stuff. So, I mean, really, we're at like a pivotal moment in Canada for Bitcoin owners. And if you're just a casual owner, like you got like, $1,000 of Bitcoin, like maybe it's not a big deal to you. But if you've really done the work and you understand that Bitcoin is a savings technology that is going to potentially become a lifeboat for you in your retirement and for your kids, then this is something that you should pay a lot more attention to. But, thank you for at least we're having the conversation. Hopefully people hear this before the election, but I don't know if many people listening to your show are on the fence about this, so they're probably going to support conservative policies. What do you think, Sonny? What's your take on all
Oh,
that?
I have lots of thoughts in my head right now. I wanted to point out one thing. So you started right at the top of this interview talking about the truckers, right? And what happened with the banks being shut down. Um, I was a part of that, not leading it in any way, but like an observer. I literally took my kids to Ottawa the main day of. We got ourselves a little farm, off half an hour away from the central part of Ottawa. We made our way right in there. We were celebrating. It was like Canada Day times 1,000. Um, interestingly enough, RFK, right? Who, I had read his book. What is it? The Real Anthony Fauci or whatever, way back in the day as well. It was a brilliant man. He was the first guy in the United States in the political sphere, if I'm not mistaken, who made that bold remark the year before Trump did so, right? Where he said, "Look, if I become president, I'll put 4 million Bitcoin on the balance sheet as a reserve asset." And he also went on to say that it was the Canadian truckers and the single mom that had her bank account shut down was what threw him over the edge and was what orange pilled him. And now we're seeing what's happening in the United States as a ripple effect of that. And yeah, while David Bailey obviously played a huge part in Trump's orange pilling, I'm pretty sure RFK also had a part, right? So I guess what I wanted to say is what I walked away with from that the trucker movement, and by the way, that marked the turning point of the whole COVID debacle, right? Like like once the trucker thing got activated, and all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, look over here, Russia," right? Like it was what brought, I think, many, many millions of people around the world to wake up. And so I believe today that there are many Canadians that understand what's going on. And it was during that time O'Toole got kicked out. That was when Pierre started really piping up, right? Um, so where am I going with all this? One concern I have is so Pierre's obviously or felt like he was pro Bitcoin, right? He had the famous thing at Tahini's where he, did the Bitcoin transaction. But then he kind of got blasted, right? People were like, "Oh, look, Bitcoin price is down now since he said this." Obviously, it's way up since then, but that caused him to recoil a bit. And I haven't heard him talk about Bitcoin since then. In fact, through my kind of inner connections, I'm almost hearing he's trying to distance himself from the Bitcoin community. Why is that? And does he really get this revolution, or is he just too timid? Like, what are your thoughts on Pierre here?
That's a really great question, and it's something I think about a lot because I joined the Conservative Party back in 2022 to vote for Pierre Poilievre, and in the past, I voted for Trudeau in 2015, and I was never considered myself a conservative before that. And I think I was convinced by Pierre's honesty and conviction on what he was saying when I would hear him speak off the record on YouTube videos or even to the House of Commons. No script, no notes, just going on for 10 minutes about the history of money. And then I heard him on Robert Breedlove's podcast, and you can tell he clearly has a depth of knowledge about the history of money going all the way back to like the Magna Carta days. He talks about that quite a bit. And I think because I got to know some of the people in his circle a little bit, like I went to one of the conferences and I met his campaign manager and his a couple of people in his close group. And I feel like the consistent sort of read I got on Pierre and his team was that the people around him were not really that much into Bitcoin, like most people. They're political kind of career politics people. And Pierre was very passionate about money and his wife. And so they were both passionate about sound money and Bitcoin. Um, but he can't stick his neck out and be the one out there championing Bitcoin because even though like 10% of Canadians own Bitcoin, 70% of Canadians are concerned with the cost of living and they're not orange pilled yet and they don't really truly understand the cause of inflation, the cause of the housing crisis. And he can't both be trying to win in the election and win support and represent the base and represent the centrists and also be trying to like stick his neck out to be taking swings at him constantly from the mainstream news and the liberals and NDPs about educating about Bitcoin. So there's that piece of it, which the reason why I kind of tried to start the Bitcoin Coalition of Canada and tried to create this vehicle that would help educate policymakers and journalists about Bitcoin was because I realized that we got to do the work. Like we have to go out there and educate the MPs, educate the staffers. This is what they did, and the Americans did this with the Bitcoin Today Coalition, the Bitcoin Policy Institute, Satoshi Action Fund, all these groups where they would go out and they would educate the lawmakers at the states, and they would educate the staffers in Washington and the different, state um, staffers and stuff like that. They would go and they wrote a book, Bitcoin and the American Dream, and they would go give that out. And they would do the groundwork to really educate the people that were around the policymakers and the journalists. And that makes it more comfortable for the leader to stick his neck out. If everybody has like a baseline understanding and education about why Bitcoin is important from the political perspective, so it's good for jobs, it's good for energy security, good for the grid, blah blah blah, and it matches with what their party platform is, free speech, property rights, stay the hell out of my life, whatever it is, like freedom of choice, then they'll feel more comfortable to go out and stick their neck out and defend Bitcoin publicly. So we don't have as much of a an effort to do that here in Canada. And I tried my best and we're still trying, but it's not funded enough. We need more funding. And when you can't donate Bitcoin and get a tax write-off or at least even not have to pay cap gains, it's less interesting for a Bitcoin whale to donate Bitcoin to a policy group if they have to pay a 30% cap gains on it. So we just have these roadblocks for this, but we also like need the superstar kind of like people like Dennis Porter and all these people at the BPI. Like we need more of those people to sort of start working for policy groups in Canada. So anyways, that's one piece of it where Pierre's not going to take the Bitcoin flag and lead with that because he's got another mission. And it's our job to do that groundwork and to do the backbenching, whether it's for Pierre or for the Liberal Party or for the NDP or any party, because Joel Lightbound, who's a Liberal MP, is a Bitcoin advocate. Like he led the Indu committee where I got to speak and Carlo from ShakePay helped set that up with me where I was able to go represent Bitcoin and talk about the importance of Bitcoin from the financial inclusion perspective and, not just this, anti-government sort of message that a lot of Bitcoiners have, but really Bitcoin can help. It can help a lot of people and it should be championed by the left. And Joel Lightbound was the chair of the committee, and he asked some really good questions. He had clear reverence and respect for Satoshi. It wasn't just like, oh, Bitcoin number go up. It was like he asked me direct pointed questions that showed me that he really got it. And then he came and spoke at the Canadian Bitcoin conference last year. And you could tell he gets it. So we got to do the work in a multi-partisan way to just make the conversation more elevated and more safe in Canada for politicians to talk about it. But we do have this issue that I talked about already that is like the money's been taken out and now we're highly propagandized to. And unfortunately, as long as the CBC is getting $1.4 billion of funding and all these left wing journalists are being paid to continue to propagate these left wing ideas because their paychecks depend on it, they're not going to be talking positively about Bitcoin. They have a way to do, they have carte blanche, basically say whatever they want. I mean, as long as it supports the left.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like a dark place that we're in as a country. However, Brad, you and I have known each other for a long time. Um, some shit's gone down though in the last year that I would never. Probably I was thinking maybe when I'm 90 years old, we'll start seeing some of these things. BlackRock, Fidelity, largest companies in the world. What is it like? United States,
Crazy.
China, BlackRock, I think is like, if you look at assets or whatever, are now embracing Bitcoin. You got Larry Fink going on blast about Bitcoin. Okay. Now, let's just put politics aside. There's a lot of people that listen to guys like Larry Fink. There's a lot of people that know what BlackRock is. You can't just put that one under the rug. You can forget about Brad. You can, turn your TV off when Sunny comes on or whatever, but it's hard to ignore the BlackRocks and the Fidelities of the world. You've got the best performing stocks in the world, outperforming N fucking Nvidia last year was MicroStrategy. You had Metaplanet, the best performing stock in Japan, absolutely crush it with their Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So now you've got pubcos, like the biggest ones in the world, the fastest growing ones in the world, embracing Bitcoin. And then last but not least, look, growing up, I was always told that the most powerful human on earth is the President of the United States. Now, I know there's been a lot of rubbing the wrong way. There's some heat there, right? With Trump going on blast about the 51st state, etc., which I want to kind of get into as well. But you've got now the most powerful person in the world, our biggest trading partner, our neighbor. We're like the little brother of the United States. Now, not just saying Bitcoin's the future, they're literally like putting meaning behind their words. Like they're actually taking action, right? You saw yesterday what happened with Cantor and Tether and SoftBank. And I
Crazy.
mean, my point is these things are way bigger than CTV or whatever, CBC or the $1 billion that's coming in, right? So the world at large has seen the light, and yeah, Canada has a lot of, I think, people that hate on the fact that Trump's making these statements. But can you talk to me a little bit about that? What are your thoughts on? I mean, to me, the fact that he became the president, obviously with a lot of struggle, right? I mean, it wasn't easy, and then he chooses to go on blast about Canada, about how we're going to become the 51st state. A lot of Canadians that I've met write it off. They're like, "Oh no, it's just his like negotiation. Oh, he's just crazy. Oh, it'll never happen." Um, Look at the guy's track record. He does whatever he says. And I don't think he would just do this randomly just to kind of get people riled up. What's going on with all this? Because there is the political race. And then as a follow-up question, he actually wants the liberals to come into power, right? Like that's what he said. So can you kind of help us like read between the lines here? Is there any kind of meat to this? If so, like where do we find ourselves today, Brad?
Did first before I get into it, did you ask David Bailey what he thought of that topic
Yeah, I've talked to David, not maybe not on our podcast, but I've talked to
about
him
the
several
Canada
times. Yeah, of course.
51st state stuff? What's his thoughts? What does he think? Does he think he's just joking, or does he think he's serious?
Dude, the day he gets into power, he talks about it. Christmas Day, he talks about it. New Year's, he talks about it. He talks about it over and over and over again. I mean, there's no question that he's serious. Like, and why would we not take
Yeah.
him seriously? So I think David does think he's serious. In fact, Nolan, I think you brought his name up earlier today, who was is a Canadian, right, by the way, and was one of the first people to approach the government, right? If you recall, way back in the day, he tried to orange pill them, what, 7 years ago. We just got off a call with Kyle, which is Trudeau's brother, obviously the complete opposite of Trudeau, a Bitcoiner. He's done a lot of, groundwork here. Um, but I'm just wondering, and these people are also kind of indicating to me that, look, there is some serious weight behind this. Yeah, maybe it's a threat, maybe it's a negotiation tactic, but we should also be prepared for maybe it's not. And so again, I'm not for, against, I don't know. I'm not, even big enough to have influence on it, but it's something that I think about a lot. But I'm just curious to know what are your thoughts in terms of this? Because, and then again, him wanting the Liberals to win, like where's the 4D chess? Like, what's going on here?
Well, Canada's extremely resource rich, and we have a government that is anti-resources. It seems that way. They've put a whole bunch of anti-energy bills in, and they've basically blockaded Alberta from the east and the west coast. And I mean, it's a complicated topic because I think Trump's just trying to crush communism in his backyard and did not calculate how politically kind of easily propagandized Canadians are and how quickly we would flip and support communism to stand against him. And I feel like it's really like there's the real battle is China and the United States. It's communism versus the West. It's capitalism, whatever, however you want to frame that. The rise of China or the peak of China, wherever you want to put them on the cycle of rise, peak, decline, and the United States as the world superpower that is probably in decline, arguably like in mid stage, potentially late stage decline, because of the debt and the dollar losing its relevance in the world. And the inability for the United States to be the policeman of the world, as you can see with the war in Israel, the war in Ukraine, all this stuff, right? Like the Bretton Woods agreement was you use our dollar, it'll be backed by gold. You guys don't have to worry about securing your borders and the shipping lanes. We'll do that for you. And everybody will use the dollar and the world will be safe and we'll keep everything humming along just fine. You can focus on productivity and investing in your countries and growing and happiness and unity and all that stuff, right? So that kind of ended what the sanctions on Russia in 2021 or 2, whenever that was, when half the world decided, well, we don't really want to go along with the ability for our assets to be taken arbitrarily because whatever the United States says, and if we don't align with that, this is a signal that we're going to start looking at alternative options. And that was kind of, I feel like, the peak of the dollar's dominance and hegemony in the arc of history. And since then, I felt like I wrote this in 2022 when that happened. It was like a nuclear bomb that was dropped on the global order financially. And it's going to take a while for the repercussions and the shockwaves and the fallout to happen and for people to realize what's happening with that. And really, that's shown up, and a lot of people talk about BRICS and all these other things, but it's shown up in the rise of the relevance of Bitcoin and gold and the decline and the dominance and the relevance of the dollar and US bonds. And I mean that is the whole story. It's the dollar and the bonds of the United States are no longer the only like supreme reserve currency and reserve asset of the world for central banks and institutions and other, countries and it's just like part of what we're seeing is just the gyrations of like how all this shakes out. And I think the whole Canada story is just like not really that relevant in the long arc of history and the main conversation. It's like really it's China has a major influence in Canada. The fentanyl crisis is real. There's record numbers of money laundering cases being reported on, insane amounts of drugs being found in Canada that are tied to the Chinese. Um, there's actually Chinese CCP infiltration in the Canadian government. They're actually trying to support Mark Carney to become the prime minister, and of course, the left-wing media reports on it as CCP targets Mark Carney. because this is the level of propaganda we're dealing with. It's not CCP wants Mark Carney to win and is amplifying his message online. It's CCP targets Mark Carney. So the headline people that will just skim headlines will just see that and they'll be like, oh, I guess that's bad, that they're trying to target Mark Carney, not knowing that they're trying to make him win. So the whole thing is like, I don't really pay that much attention to the 51st state stuff because really what matters more to me as a Canadian and as a Bitcoiner living in Canada is if Mark Carney wins, I could easily see Alberta separating from Canada. Whether they become an independent country or whether they join the United States doesn't really matter. Obviously, our Canadian dollar has gone down in value quite a bit with this excessive money printing and debt binging. Our real estate market is one of the worst in the world. We have the two top cities that are the highest, real estate bubbles on the planet are in Canada. I think it's Vancouver and Toronto. And we've got record levels of uh, drug overdoses. Crime has risen crazily. So there is a real argument for a lot of people in Canada would be better off if we were part of the States. I mean, if you look at the stats are kind of shocking that the lowest, the worst off state, I think is Louisiana, and our best province is like underneath Louisiana if you measure against GDP and like income levels and cost of living. So our best province is worse than their worst province. So I mean, you must have seen the chart that came out that's making the rounds all the time is like GDP growth over the last 10 years. Canada is at the bottom of the G20. We've only grown like maybe 1 or 2% GDP in real terms. And the reason why is because we've got a government that's addicted to anti-energy policies that they don't want to see any energy exploration, any pipelines. They want to see all this green energy stuff get pushed forward, but more so they want to control what people say and think and do online. And we see that with their wanting to push CBDCs, with their freezing of bank accounts, with their control of the media. And it's just it's just fantasy math that they're running by. So it's shown as our dollars losing its relevance, businesses are leaving. You look at the entrepreneurship chart in Canada, it's like basically stagnant over the last 10 years where government jobs has gone off the hook. Like the stats, I was looking at them recently, since Trudeau took office, it took Canada almost 150 years to get to 250,000 federal employees. And over the last 10 years, Trudeau's added 110,000 employees to the federal workforce. So he's increased our debt by like 30 or 40%. He's printed more money than any prime minister in Canadian history combined and has also grown the federal workforce by 40%. So the federal government bureaucracy grew by 40%. So when you think about this, like from that whole thing with like what's Trump going to do or say, we're just like a middle power. We don't really matter that much in the world. And it's more about like if you want to think about it from your own personal net worth and your own personal safety, it's like, do I want to be living in a country that is rising in crime and criminals can't be really dealt with because the government in power is trying to care more about, equity and fairness in like prosecuting criminals than stopping crime and having safe neighborhoods? Or do I want to have like, why am I going to be patriotic about a dollar that the country sold all of its gold? Nothing backs it. They are anti-energy when we're in a country that should be one of the richest countries in the world because of all the resources we have. And you look at the United States, I don't know most of the United States. I wouldn't want to live there. Like as a Canadian, I wouldn't want to be in a lot of those areas. But the cost of living is so much better, and it seems like the quality of life is better in a lot of places in the States. And like we didn't get a 40% better health care for the 40% more debt we got. It just seems like to me, it doesn't matter what Trump's saying about Canada. Really, it matters about like what's going to happen with China and what's going to happen with the United States and how do I protect myself? Well, it's owning Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a post-trust digital money for a digital world with digital intelligence that's a decentralizing world. And it gives you the ability to leave. Of course, I want to fight for Canada, and I love Cape Breton. That's where I'm from. It's beautiful. I, I was, I don't know. I might just try to get a Alberta citizenship, maybe when when the breakup happens, because I was born in Alberta, but
Where?
I've never been back.
Where?
Calgary.
I was born in Edmonton.
Oh, right on, right
My
on.
parents still live there, so in fact,
Oh,
I'm
cool.
visiting in a month or two. So Alberta's got some good vibes right now. Okay, well, maybe let in the last few minutes here, let's maybe like because we've done I think a pretty good job of setting the stage of how dark and gloomy things are in Canada. I think alternatively, we've also painted a very positive picture of what's going on in the United States. I'm sure a lot of people are aware. What can people do? People that are listening to this, what can they do? Because it's very easy to feel powerless. It's very easy to feel like, oh, like I'm just one guy, I'm one girl. Like, what can I really do? What can people do? Should they be going on blast on social media? I don't know, talking about this stuff that they're. I mean, there's only a few days left, right? So how does something positive come out of this?
Well, obviously, it's a Bitcoin podcast, so people love Bitcoin, I imagine. And if you love Bitcoin and you love Canada, then you should not want a central banker running your country who is against free speech and wants to regulate what you can say and do online. You look at where the United Kingdom is right now with all this crazy shit where like 30 people a day are being arrested for posting memes online, and that's coming to Canada. So I think like the answer is pretty clear. You just keep stacking sats, and you got to go bring 5 people to vote conservative. And if you do that, then that's what you can do to stay in Canada and hopefully we have a chance because the government, whether it's the left or the right, is not going to save you. The government is going to continue to print money. The debt's not going to get paid back. Like I don't think a significant amount of debt is ever going to get paid back, whether it's Pierre is in power or it's Carney or whoever, Trump, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like if you look at the debt ceiling in the U.S. over history, it's just a show. So that's why we Bitcoin. We know that Bitcoin is capped at 21 million and it's the only way that you can be truly financially sovereign and that dollars are going to continue to lose value over time. Doesn't matter who's in power. It's like at least what you should do is want to have a country that respects property rights, free speech, and understands sound money. And if they don't understand sound money, at least they need to respect individual liberties. And that's the only person who's running right now is Pierre Poilievre, who understands the importance of these things. And for yourself, I mean, Bitcoin is in self custody. I mean, you got to have Bitcoin in self custody is optionality for you and your family. So you're going to be doing very well holding Bitcoin over a long time frame. And I mean, that's why I'm not as panicked as I would be if I didn't have Bitcoin. If I was just a successful entrepreneur and I had all my money in the Canadian banking system or in my Canadian business, man, I'd be a lot less hopeful than I am because at least I can leave. You know what I mean? So you want to have optionality. I know you're talking about positivity, but man, you look at this report that just came out by the Privy Council. I'm not sure if you've seen that. That's the Prime Minister's office. It's not some think tank or some like right wing, like anti-liberal independent news agency or something. It's the Privy Council. It's government. It's the Prime Minister's office, basically. They came out with this report of what Canada is going to be like in 2040, and they just released it this week. And they're talking like under people are going to be eating cats under bridges in 2040. Like they're talking about the idea of social upward mobility is going to be non-existent in Canada in 2040. And the idea of home ownership is going to be only for the top earners in Canada. The wealthy will be there'll be division across social economic classes worse than ever before in Canada. Wealthy will be persecuted by the poor. Left will be persecuted by the right. Like they're talking about complete societal breakdown in Canada. And is who's talking about it? Like nobody's talking about this. So Canada really is on the path to being completely broken. And Carney put out his budget, and it's another hundred and some billion dollars of spending over the next 3 years. Still against pipeline development, still trying to push for this sort of like extremism on the climate stuff and pushing this fantasy that we can replace all of our energy with windmills and unicorn breath or something. It just it doesn't make any sense financially. And if the last 10 years show you anything, it's that the idea that the budget will balance itself and they can spend their way to be able to create jobs that are long term and sustaining is not reality. And I'm not against redistribution of wealth. That's the one thing I want to make clear. Like I grew up in poverty, so I benefited from the social safety net. I lived in government housing. My mom was on welfare at one point. I think, she was on welfare. I was on EI. Like I benefited from the public healthcare system, even though it kind of sucks. So I'm not against taxes. I'm not against wealth redistribution. I pay a lot of taxes. I don't mind paying taxes in Canada. I like the idea of Canada. But we have a government that thinks that wealth redistribution and wealth creation can be kind of mixed. And rather than supporting entrepreneurship to create wealth and then redistribute the wealth, they create the wealth from nothing. They print the money and then redistribute it. And all that does is it devalues everybody's savings and it just makes the income gap wider and the wealth gap wider. So wealth needs to be created before it can redistribute it. And that is like at risk here. Like that's what we're really fighting for is like the ability for you to safely create wealth in your country is kind of on the voting block here. So, we're going to see nothing but more government spending, more debt, more devaluation of your savings. And yeah, Bitcoin price is going to keep going up. So, really, it's at the point where you got to bring five people to go vote conservative, and you got to keep stacking sats, and hopefully we'll end up with the best of both worlds. Because if Pierre wins, which I think he's going to win, I think the polls are all messed up. I've been out door knocking actually, Sonny. I don't know if I told you that.
No, I didn't know that. Cool.
I wanted
Okay.
I wanted to hear like because I wanted to hear what people are saying at the doors. I'm like I didn't want to just hear what people are saying on Twitter and on Facebook. I wanted to hear what people are saying at the doors.
And
I went out door knocking with not just my conservative MP, but I went out with the liberal MP too. Like I wanted to hear both
interesting.
perspectives. I wanted to hear what are people saying at the doors when I'm with a conservative MP, and what are people saying at the doors when I'm with the liberal MP.
Hmm.
And the polls are completely wrong, man. Like it's not this wide gap. The support that I'm seeing here in both Ontario and in Nova Scotia, it's like 60% conservative at the doors for people who are going to vote because there's a good 40% of them that are just like apathetic. They're not going to vote. They don't care about the election. They're just not really paying attention. But of the people who are opinionated and they've chosen who they're going to vote for, or they, have an inclination, it's 60% conservative. So the Bitcoiners are a huge voting block. And, the 4 million of us, if we actually got to them and we got the word out that, hey, Bitcoin, if that's important to you, Pierre Poilievre's your guy. He owns it. Mark Carney hates it. He's talked about it negatively multiple times. There's multiple MPs. There's tons of MPs in Canada that own Bitcoin and are supportive of Bitcoin. And just generally, the conservative way is more about freedom of choice. And if you want to be able to have the ability to vote with your fiat, then you got to go vote with your vote and choose conservative.
Yeah, man, normally I probably wouldn't have entertained a conversation even along these lines a couple years ago, but talking to David Bailey and a lot of these guys, I've recently woken up to the fact that Bitcoin's not just a little dinky little, plaything on the corner anymore. It's for real and it's on people like us to go out there and not just, tell our family members and friends, but try and figure out how to get to the peers of the world. So, great job and everything you're doing. I know we're not at the finish line yet. Yeah, man, amazing. Yeah. So thank you for coming on the show. Let's do a live stream later today as well. I'm happy to, support in any way I can, man.
Yeah, man, and just, like you said, the positive message is Bitcoin at the end. It's like leave people with positive, hopeful thing. You just
And
can't.
and those three
It's
things I mentioned that's happening in the US, like Black Rocks and the nation state adopt, dude, I did not think we were gonna get there this fast. To go from
me
El
too.
Salvador to the United States is like amazing. And now we're all kind of
Oh,
sandwiched in between. We're gonna figure it out.
and
It's gonna
and
be
and the
okay.
and the fact that not only has all this stuff happened, but
Yeah.
the price is still pretty low compared to where I think it's going to be in 5 and 10 years. That when these drops happen down to like 70K or whatever,
Mm,
it's like, man, do I ever want to buy more Bitcoin when I see that happen? Because I know where it's going. And I actually feel like happy for people who haven't bought Bitcoin yet, because that's the majority of people in the world. When the price drops, I'm always out there being like, this is your
yeah,
moment. You got to
that's
buy some
when,
of
yeah,
this.
but nobody does that. I don't know. I'm almost convinced that a lot of these arguments you're saying, I'm fully sold on them. Okay, like everything you're saying, inflation as an example, or all these things, but they're almost like second order, like type of effects, right? So they're not very intuitive, and I think that's where a lot of people are stuck because the liberals, it's like, oh, we'll just print money, we'll give it to you. Oh, fuck, you give me free money. Like most people will just take that and run. Like the whole concept of even trying to explain inflation and money printing leads to the devalue. It's like you have to kind of get supply and demand. So it's time that people sit down and do a bit of a, deep dive into like what's going on and start asking those tough questions. Hopefully our podcast, gets them to ask a few more. And I'm sure you and I will be producing a lot more content over the next few days, man. Let's just do what we can. The internet too. Imagine if we didn't have the internet. Like we've got the internet, we've got Bitcoin, we've got these tools for video cameras and lights and mics and so all we can do is just try our best and let's see where it goes, man. Like I said, we've got Canadian truckers, we've got a lot on our side right now. So I think it's good to be excited and let's go and try and make a difference. All right, I
All
think we're at the end
right.
of our time, Brad. We'll reconnect again soon. Thank you so much for your time. You're always such a delight to speak with, and I like the beard, man. Maybe you should run.
You know what,
Maybe
man?
you
I
should run. Don't run. Yeah.
I think I'd make about like two hours before they start looking through my tweets and my Facebook posts, and I'd be
Yeah.
out.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon, man. Cheers.
Thanks, Sonny.